Hey, welcome to another episode of me talking. Not exactly becoming a techno wizard, or is it? Yeah, I say it is. So, welcome to another episode of becoming a techno wizard. Um, I don't know why, but again, just feel like this low energy. You know, I've been working on my portfolio the last couple of days. I feel pretty good about it. Finally got some more feedback from my instructor for the case study. It was looking pretty good. So I don't think that's the problem, but I don't know. In my experience, whenever you feel like this, like unmotivated, like being lazy and just you would expect, sometimes you would think that, hey, maybe I just need to take a break, maybe it's burnout, so I'm just, I don't know, watch some videos, do some yoga or whatever um you want to do to kind of release. But I've done that, and my experience, like I said before, it's I think it's better to just do s- do this, right? To try to provide value to other people, share my thoughts, opinions, experiences, or whatever, in hopes that somebody else will extract value from it. Because these feelings feel like um, an example of, I don't know, man. Just feel, I don't even know what to say here, but what I was thinking of doing today is going through um doing a little reaction, right? Because I have a lot of ideas lately about sharing my thoughts on just sharing my thoughts more on more things, following Gary V's advice, and that talks about, you can never really share enough stuff. You can never put enough stuff out there, document enough stuff and everything like that. Because number one, you never know what's going to hit for other people. You never know what's going to help other people. You know, what's going to help you in the long run. Me as in, myself. And furthermore, it kind of helps you. It helps you a lot to get rid of the fear, right? A lot of us have a fear around putting ourselves out there, about not being a perfectionist, um, or really that's an excuse as to, why we claim we don't want to put ourselves out there. But we have this fear, this anxiety about sharing our thoughts and ideas and stuff like that, and just sharing your thoughts, uh, no matter those fears, helps to get over it, and helps to make you a stronger person and a more, I don't want to say valuable, but helps you to know how to give value more often. And giving value, providing a service to people is often a great way to feel valuable, to feel better about yourself. Maybe it's egoistic altruism, maybe it's just altruism. I don't know how you want to call it, but it works. So I'm going to do that. Um, but specifically today, I want to go over, there's a podcast called The Anatomy of Next. Really great podcast. Really enjoyed it. I've listened to many of the episodes at least twice, or at least the first season I listened to twice. I just started listening to or just finished listening to the second season. Um, haven't watched them, again and again. Yeah, I mean twice, but I just listened to it a couple of days ago, and had some thoughts about, their stuff. Um, Even though I do want to go over that, it has been a few days, maybe even a whole week since I had listened to those videos, and I don't want to listen to it all again right now. 'Cause I'm just not in a good mood. um, and specifically for those episodes, they're like so in depth and so thought provoking that it's better for me. I'd feel better if I had time to research. So whenever I do share my opinions and stuff like that, it's backed by other research and data. Um, so instead, I'm going to go to their site. The people who make Anatomy of Next, they have what's called the Founders Fund. Um, say, I think VC fund, a venture capitalist fund, that so they you know give money to startups. They fund startups in exchange for, a piece of that, or a little ownership or something like that, deal flow, whatever they call it. I think it's pretty cool. But what I noticed is that on their site they have a manifesto. So I feel like it'll be cool to go through the manifesto because for me, reading futuristic stuff like this, like Founders Fund is all about, futuristic kind of moonshot projects or futuristic projects, things that kind of help humanity go to the next level. And reading, listening, just being involved in that stuff really, really excites me, and I enjoy it a lot. So I think it'll be good, for my mood to read through that manifesto, but also to share my thoughts and share this manifesto with you all, um, whoever's watching this in whatever timeline. But yeah, so I'm gonna do that, and I think this is gonna be a little fun experiment because I would like to do more of this stuff more often. Um, I would like to share my ideas on like books I've read, books I'm reading, podcasts I'm listening to, articles I find, uh, stuff I just, movies, episodes, everything. I want to share my thoughts on everything because, like I said in the very beginning of this whole podcast, or this whole, not podcast anymore, but this whole YouTube channel, is that kind of like what Gary Vee said, you never know what's going to be valuable to other people. It could be, tomorrow somebody finds this. It could be in a month, and it could be 10 years, and even in 100 years. I don't know how long this is going to be up, but you never know when somebody else finds your stuff and they're reading or watching you, seeing how you're thinking, and they connect with you, or they say, "Oh, I'm not alone in the way I think," or "Oh, that inspires me," "Oh, that motivates me," and that helps them to do something really amazing. So that's why, I like to share my thoughts as raw as possible, because everybody's doing. A lot of people are doing polished stuff, but there's not enough people just just being real. So that's what I like to do on my channel, and hope it helps people one day. So, anyways, here we go. Founders Fund, their manifesto starts with this: what happened to the future? So this is interesting right here because this is something, like, first and foremost, a lot of people ask themselves, or at least I ask myself, a lot of people that are kind of futurists, or at least I want to be a futurist. Um, when we look at science fiction, especially me, like I told you, I've read tons of books, over 1,000, maybe a couple thousand, most likely a couple thousand, and the vast majority of those were fantasy books. Not because I don't like science fiction, but because I have not been able to find a lot of good science fiction. There's so much of it, especially nowadays, particularly nowadays, that is apocalyptic, that is post-apocalyptic, that is the worst case scenario, what happens then, and then blah blah. That's where the story takes off. Like humanity has destroyed itself in some way, some shape or form, or humanity is going down the drain. Now you got to fix her. Now people are got to deal with it. Blah blah blah. And it's like so draining. Like to me, it's depressing that we can't seem to create more fiction like we used to, like Star Trek, like Star Wars. Even Star Wars is more fantasy. It's a lot more fantasy. I wouldn't even call that like positive necessarily, but Star Trek is a good example of a kind of the old view of science fiction. The Jetsons, Back to the Future. These quirky shows and movies and books and everything like that. Um, that inspired people to think. Oh, sorry. That inspired people to think positively about the future, right? So, I don't know if somebody's calling me. Whatever. Um, so the question becomes, what happened? Yeah, why don't we think about these positive futures anymore? Like some of my favorite science fiction books were old books, right? Like I can't even. I'm not even sure if I can point to any current day, any books that were written in the 21st century that were started off from a positive standpoint, right? Um, that's concerning to me. Maybe I'm just haven't been looking enough. That's probably true as well. Because there's so many books written out there, it's really difficult to find these. But yeah. Well, Ender's Game is pretty cool. Um, but it's not. It's a little dark, but Uh, I think was that written in the 21st century though? Like the first Ender's Game? I'm not sure. Like I read the whole series, the Shadow series with Bean and all that. That's a really great series. Y'all should check it out. 1985 military science fiction. Nope, not in the 21st century. Um, like Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, all these authors and stuff like that. They were famous before, before like modern day. It's so sad. But anyways, yeah, I agree. Like this is a question I ask myself: what happened to the future? This is just the first sentence. Sorry, I'm not sorry, but it's funny. Anyways, next. Oh, my computer is slow. Okay. We invest in smart people solving difficult problems, often difficult scientific or engineering problems. Here's why. That's skip something. Okay. I want to say I thought I was going to answer that question. What happens to the future? I guess it's building up to it. Okay. Here's why. A, introduction. Oh, okay. Problem. We have two primary related interests. One, finding ways to support technological development. Technology is the fundamental driver of growth in the industrialized world. I agree. And two, earning outstanding return for our investors. I have a little annotation here. I'm guessing this is it. This annotation from the 1960s to the 1990s, venture capital was an excellent way to pursue these twin interests. From 1999 through the present, the industry has posted negative mean and median returns, with only a handful of funds doing very well. What happened? So looking at it from a business standpoint, all right. Oh, this is the annotation. Okay, we have somewhat greater incentives than many other firms to figure out the answers to these questions. As the partners and employees of Founders Fund are collectively the largest investors in our funds. By contrast, industry convention only requires VCs to put up 1% of the total capital of the fund. The perhaps misleadingly named GP commitment. At FF, about 20% of the total capital we manage is our own capital. So that's interesting. So it sounds like for those that are kind of shaky on financial stuff, as like me, venture capitalist firms, they have a bunch of money that they give startups to get return on the investment that they invest in a startup, and then but the problem is that those funds, like the people who put money in those funds, only 1% is like their actual money. Most of it is probably like, I don't know what is the rest of the money. The largest investors in our fund, collectively the largest investors in our funds. By contrast, industry convention only requires VCs to put up 1% of the total capital of the fund. Perhaps misleading name GP commitment. I'm not sure if I understand. So where does the rest of the money come from? Oh, this is probably unnecessary. Restores the amount of invested capital expected from the general partner of a private equity fund. LP. Yeah, so okay, yeah, this is not necessary to know too much about that. It's a lot of complicated stuff. But I'm going to skip over that right now. Okay, VC's long nightmare. To understand why VC has done so poorly, it helps to approach the future through the lens of VC portfolios during the industry's heyday, comparing past portfolios to portfolios as they exist today. In the 1960s, venture closely associated with the emerging semiconductor industry, Intel, e.g., parentheses, Intel, e.g., was one of the first example. I think that's what it stands for. Um, was one of the first and is still one of the greatest VC investments. Although success now makes these investments seem blandly sensible, even obvious, the industries and companies backed by venture were actually extraordinarily ambitious for their eras. In the 1970s, computer hardware and software companies received funding. The 1980s brought the first waves of biotech, mobility, and networking companies. And the 1990s added the internet in its various guises. Okay, yeah. Although success now makes these investments seem blandly sensible, even obvious, the industries and companies backed by venture were actually extraordinarily ambitious for their eras. Okay, yeah, I agree. Like, think about all these like semiconductor, like Intel, um, Cisco, IBM. I think IBM is much older. But all these big tech companies that we see today, Apple even, like people forget Apple is really old. It's way older than Google. It's not, on the on the same thing. Apple is huge. They're $1 trillion company for a reason. Like, but when they first started, they weren't. People were looking at computers like they were a fad. It's so funny when you look at these commercials or these criticisms of computers and the internet. They're like, oh, what's the internet? It's a nerdy little thing. It's a blah 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 blah, right? Surfing the web and all this. If you ever see these commercials, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But the point is that I definitely see what they mean in that a lot of these things today seems obvious. Like, yeah, invest in a computer. Like, but duh. But back then, nobody knew what a computer was, and to invest in this new machine, this thing that people said will do would would do all these sorts of things. It's hard for people to believe that. Um, and today, a great example of that is virtual reality. Still to this day, even after Oculus has done so much, has after Vive and after the Index came out and they have all these games and stuff like that, people still see virtual reality as a fad. They still see virtual reality as like dying. Like virtual reality is dead. All right, you see all these articles almost every year, and I mean, there's a number of legit reasons why they think that, and it's not gonna. I do know that, or I'm pretty sure that VR is not gonna take off in the next decade. It's not gonna be like smartphones or anything like that. It's the long game. VR is gonna take decades before it really becomes like where computers and smartphones are today. However, it's not a fad, right? It's just a very complicated technology that's always going to have moving goalposts, right? But still, people are looking at it as like, oh, it's just the next 3D TV, And that it's funny to think that people thought about computers the same way back in the 80s and the 70s, or even the 90s. People still thought computers were a fad. So yeah. But the people who are sensible enough to invest in these, they made bank. So when HP developed the Pocket Calculator in 1967, even HP itself had serious doubts about the product's commercial viability, and only intervention by the founders saved the calculator. Wow, that's crazy. Like HP, as anything, they were a startup before, and then it became a bigger company, and then they had this quirky product that said, "Hey, we're going to make a calculator. We're going to make this little device that people can crunch numbers into." People, and to think that people thought this was going to be like a bust, a fad, and it only got saved because the founders, the original visionaries, were like, "Nah, we need to push this through." So that's crazy. First pocket calculator. Wow. All right. Later, when the heads of major computing corporations, IBM, DEC, I don't know what that is, openly questioned whether any individual would ever want or need a computer, or even that computers themselves would be smaller than a VW, Volkswagen, I guess, like a car. Yeah, because computers were like took up the size of a room, like of a building. And so for people, visionaries, to be like, oh no 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 no, these computers are going to be small. Like everybody's going to have one in their house. Like, well, what? People thought they were crazy. So yeah, an individual want or need a computer. Investment in companies like Microsoft and Apple in the mid 1970s seemed fairly bold. In 1976, when Genentech launched, the field of recombinant DNA technology was less than 5 years old, and no established player expected that insulin or human growth hormone could be cloned or commercially manufactured, much less by a startup. My VCs backed, but VCs backed all these enterprises in the hope of profiting from a wildly more advanced future. And in exchange for that hope of profit, VC took genuine risks on technological development. Definitely true. Very interesting stuff right here. In the late 1990s, venture portfolios began to reflect a different sort of future. Some firms still supported transformational technologies, e.g., search mobility, but venture investing shifted away from funding transformational companies and toward companies that solved incremental problems or even fake problems. Oof, oof. All right. Having Cosmo.com message your Kit Kats to the office. What? Um, This model worked for a brief period thanks to an enormous stock market bubble. Indeed, it was even economically rational for VCs to fund these ultimately worthless companies because they produce extraordinary returns. In fact, the best returns in the industry's history. And there have been subsequent bubbles, acquisition bubbles, the secondary market, etc., which have continued to generate excellent returns for VCs lucky enough to tap into them. So yeah, you can probably see this in the whole app phenomenon where like app market came out and everybody was like, make an app, make an app, make an app. That's how you make money, right? Like you saw this on a consumer level. Like everyday people thought, hey, I could just make an app and I'll make a bunch of money. I could make the next Flappy Bird. I mean, granted, this is earlier than Flappy Bird, but there were plenty of like I don't want to say dumb apps, but simple apps like a lighter and all this stuff, right? And these were at first the apps had a use. Like it showed the flexibility and the fun and the stuff that you can do on the app market, right? Because this whole idea of apps was new, but then it got out of hand. People just thought you could just make anything and make a bunch of money on it, right? They weren't thinking about what problems they were solving. And now it's so interesting because as a UX designer, um, that's all we're talking about is like, what problems are we solving? It seems ridiculous to build a product that you didn't actually go out and look for users. You didn't ask them what problems they're having. You didn't build anything for them. You just thought you just come up with something and just people like build it and they will come, right? And to think this happened on the VC level as well, on the highest levels, on the with the richest people, and you can see why we're at this point now where we have so many crazy products out there, so many like huge companies, and you have no idea what they do. You have no idea the value they bring to your life, um, and we have no idea where like the progress is going, like what is being improved in our daily lives. A lot of these companies, they're focusing on like this small niche that's not even an important niche, but it's a profitable niche because it doesn't even solve a problem, but it has the pretenses of solving a problem, has the appearance of solving a problem, right? Like, hey, people might want to order this like kombucha, right? Kombucha, whatever what the thing is called. Like, it's crazy because these things aren't like big problems, but it seems like a big problem because there's people who have money are buying this thing, and they will spend like they don't really have a huge value of money, so they spend a lot of money on these like expensive luxury items, and it just gets out of hand. So yeah, I mean, this might not be exactly what it's talking about here, but that's how I'm kind of seeing it from my consumerist eyes. So we believe that the shift away from backing transformational technologies and toward more cynical, incrementalist investments broke venture capital. Definitely agree with that. Like, I think that's a huge problem with the 21st century right now is that this focus on incrementalism, this focus on the idea that, hey, don't make waves, disrupting is bad, you know, um, do small improvements, right? But throughout all of history, even though incremental improvements is important, I'm not going to say it's not, and it does have its place, but it has never been the the thing that pushes humanity right to the next level. It's been the thing that kind of ties humanity along, that kind of hand walks us along as we, slowly learn to acclimate, but it has not been the thing that solves our biggest problems. Like whenever one of our, something big comes along, that's the thing that solves the problem. That's the thing that leaps us to the next, the next level, whether it be writing, be using metal, be using uh, different types of weapons or whatever, and the invention of computers or before that automobiles, before that just in industry like factories in general. All of these were big leaps, and then the incrementalism was there's a little bit of small innovations or small additions that kind of linked it to the next level, that linked it to the next big leap, right? um, but the problem is that if the people who have the most money and the people who can make the biggest risks, if they are only ever focused on the incremental leaps or on the incremental improvements, then who is funding the big leaps? Like, who is going to make sure that that things happen? Because now, you know, this is really important now, because we now live in a world where our resources are kind of, on one side, our resources are constrained, right? There's only so many hard, like, you know, I want to say hardcore, not hardcore, but like physical resources that we can really use in terms of, you know, what we extract from the earth, you know, without polluting the atmosphere, or you know, just all the mines and stuff like that. There's only so many resources you can really extract on one side. So if a ton of people are focused on just using these resources for incremental improvements, like the smartphone, for example, is a great example. Like, we use all these precious metals in making a smartphone, and it doesn't really get any better from year to year. It's a little bit better, yes. Like, the smartphone I have, you know, from like, even this is from 2016, 2017. That's way better than what was there in 2010, and whatever's out in 2020 is much better than this. But it's not like, it's not it's not exponentially better. You know, if I got this in 2017, but this can do pretty much everything a phone can do now in 2020. The only difference is that now it's more polished, right? Now I can store more information. I can, you know, have better quality videos. It's not a huge difference. It's not like a difference between a computer from like the first Mac, and then, you know, the MacBook. You know, it's not a difference between the Walkman and the iPod, right? So yeah, definitely this is really big right here. Okay, so but these bubbles are narrower, and the general market more demanding. So VCs who continue the practices of the late 1990s, a surprising number, tend to produce very weak returns. Along the way, VC has ceased to be the funder of the future, and instead has become a funder of features, widgets, irrelevances. In large part, it also ceased making money, as the bottom half of venture produced flat to negative return for the past decade. We believe that the shift away from backing transformational technologies and toward more cynical incrementalist investment broke venture capital, as just said above, excusing Venture's nightmare decade as a product of adverse economic conditions ignores the industry's long history of strong acyclical returns for its first 40 years, as well as the consistently strong performance of the top 20% of the industry. What venture-backed changed, and that is why returns changed as well. Not everything with a plug is technology. So not all technology is created equal. There's a difference between Pong and the Concorde, or less glibly, between Intel and Pets.com. Yeah. Microprocessing represents real techno knowledge. I don't know, I can't say that word. Technological development. Peddling pet food online, less so. Conversely, things that may be dismissed as fake technologies, Amazon and Facebook, occasionally receive this critique, often resolve very challenging technological problems. Among its many innovations, Amazon helped develop intelligent customer recommendations and logistical efficiencies that allow you to order almost anything, anytime, and get it the next day. That is huge, because if y'all remember shipping, before, when you used to order something online, it used to take months to get back, or at least 30 days, right? Like, if you order anything online, you expect it to take a couple of weeks to get to you. Now it's pretty standard to expect it to come within a week, or within a few days. And if you got, you know, Amazon Prime, you can get it within a day. It's crazy. So to say Amazon is not innovative, it's absolutely like ridiculous. Same thing for Facebook. Even though it is a social media and has like done a lot of harm, it has innovated incredibly amount in terms of, you know, the social media aspect, like what you can do online, the connections you can make, and the data. The data, like, innovations is absolutely insane. You might not agree with the use of that data, but is unmistakable, and is indelible. It's you can't ignore the fact that the data, the innovations Facebook has made with data use is unparalleled. It's crazy. Okay, so among its many innovations, yeah, it's just right there. Facebook developed ways to manage large numbers of connections in a computational efficient way, create an effective developer ecosystem, and to make it pleasurable to administer your own online relationships or your online relationships. These are these also deserve attention, of course, though the internet is no longer the virgin field it once was. We dismiss as bunk the idea that the internet is tapped out. Definitely not. It's just beginning. It's like it's a baby. What companies that fail are the companies that fail to exploit the true power of the medium. Yeah. The internet is one of the most revolutionary technologies ever developed. If we all ever used X-rays for was if all we ever used what if all we ever used X-rays for what oh okay if all we ever used X-rays for was in shoe shop fluoroscopes, we would be tempted to dismiss X-rays as infertile and irrelevant. The internet cannot be judged on the follies of the late '90s alone. Yeah, yeah. So basically saying to me like, you know, people aren't really using the internet right. Like if you only ever use the internet to like check your email and you're like, oh yeah, the internet it's not that special. I'm like, you got to realize even checking your email is pretty crazy, but like the fact that you can communicate with anybody anywhere online, like anywhere across the world at any time is pretty crazy. Just what 20, 30 years ago, that was impossible. Like when your parents grew up, that was impossible. The closest thing they could do was talk to them on the phone, and even that had to go to like a switchboard, or you know, they had to wait. It was just a lot of anybody that's old, that's not old, but like has been that was born before the 21st century. You know what the hell like has happened. You understand that the internet has changed a lot, has changed our behaviors in the world a lot, and to say things like the internet is not really innovating or not really innovative and stuff like that is patently untrue. And the fact that we are using the internet for the same stuff that we used in the 90s kind of shows not that the internet is tapped out, but that people aren't using their imagination. They're not really trying to do crazy stuff with it anymore, like we like we used to dream of. So yeah. Over time, the market tends to call out fake technologies and companies, which makes it a risky proposition to invest in them. Technology company. Okay, yeah. It's possible to flip a born loser and make a handsome return, but you need to get lucky with timing, i.e., sell into a bubble. And there are and then there are the matters of conscience and reputation. Yeah. Real technology companies tend to create durable returns, making timing much less important. If you invested in webvan.com, your window of opportunity was measured in months. If you backed Intel, your window of opportunity was measured in decades. Therefore, as investors, we should seek companies developing real technologies. I think where they're going here with this too is that a lot of times when and I'm not gonna say we, but when investors, invest in these companies, they're looking for a return in the next couple of months. Like, hey, what's your returns in 18 months? 24 months, even 36 months, right? But they're missing the fact that the biggest returns ever in history has been from companies that made a return decades later. Like if you bought Apple in 1980, if you still hold it now, I don't know how much that's worth, but Apple is worth over $1 trillion. Over $1 trillion. You wouldn't have got that if you would expect it to return in the next 20 20 to 36 months or whatever, right? So it's kind of ridiculous that all these investments are being made on the the idea that it'll make a profit in the next couple of months. You need to be thinking in terms of decades, not years or months. Um, so any company that's really going to like make a difference in the world is going to take a long time to do it, and that's fine. That's a good thing. Like even Facebook, starting in like 2008 or something like that, it's been over 10 years, and it's still making a huge difference. Like it's still super profitable. So if you would have sold it like in 2010, that's nothing compared to where it is now. So, are there any real technologies left? Have we reached the end of the line, a sort of technological end of history? Pfft. Once every last retailer migrates onto the internet, will that be it? Has the developed world really developed? Full stop. Pfft. That's why I hate that term, like developed world and undeveloped world. Like, ugh, it's more a term of infrastructure. Like, we should be talking in terms of this country has a certain amount of infrastructure, this country does not. But that doesn't mean you're developed. Like, I wouldn't call America developed. Like, people can still die of freaking hunger. 30% of freaking of the youth, like this is a proven fact, about 30% of young people in America, still suffer from hunger. Like, develop what? um, anyways, once every last retailer migrates onto the internet, will that be it as a developer? Okay. Again, it may be helpful to revisit previous conceptions of the future to see if there are any areas where VC might yet properly invest. In 1958, Ford introduced the Nucleon, an atom-powered El Camino-shaped concept car. From the perspective of the present, the Nucleon seems audacious to the point of idiocy. But consider at the time, Nautilus, the first atomic submarine, had just been launched in 1954, and that less than 10 years after the first atomic bomb. The Nucleon was ambitious and a marketing gimmick to be sure, but it was not entirely out of the realm of reason. Oh wow! So basically, they were thinking of making a car that runs on nuclear power, and it seems ridiculous now, but not really because in 1940s or whatever, the atomic bomb was created, and then 10 years later, they made a submarine that runs on that runs on nuclear power. So that's why, like, this whole idea of I read this. I think, was it this from this podcast? Might have been from another podcast. No, it's from another podcast, Isaac Arthur. But he pointed out that this whole idea of everybody always saying nuclear is 20 years away, right? 20 or 30 years away. That is actually a fallacy because that's only really been said in the beginning when it was first invented in like the 1940s, 1950s, because that was a realistic idea, right? Because the atomic bomb was made in like the 1940s, and then 10 years later we started having nuclear factories. We started powering our towns with nuclear power, right? That was in 10 years. That span of 10 years, it was incredible the amount of progress that was made. So people were thinking, oh, wow, it's only going to be another, 20 years before everybody runs on nuclear power. But then Chernobyl happened. But then, had all these dumb reactionary politics that limited the investments that you would put. And, VCs themselves did not want to invest in this because they thought it was like a black, I don't want to use the term black. I hate that black is always turned with negative things, but it was used as a bad thing, right? Like nuclear power was a bad thing, and so people stopped investing in it. There started being a lot of politics in the way of making better nuclear facilities, and now we stalled out. Not because the technology it was too difficult or impossible or unrealistic, but because of politics, because of investments, because of misunderstandings of that technology and that those ideas. So definitely, it seems ridiculous to believe that we would have a nuclear powered car, right? But not really. So 10 years later, in 1968, Arthur C. Clarke predicted imminent commercial space travel and genuine infrared artificial intelligences. Ooh, yeah, his books are amazing. 2001: A Space Odyssey was fiction, of course, but again, its future didn't seem implausible at the time. Indeed, the Apollo program was ready to put Armstrong on the moon less than a decade after Gagarin, I don't know what that is, and computers were becoming commonplace just a few years after Kilby and Noyce dreamed up the integrated circuit. I don't know what those are. I had to look this up. But I do get the idea. And that, again, what I was saying, you know, back then in the 60s and the 50s or whatever, we had people going to the moon. Like before, it was like cars were new things, and then we were suddenly making rockets to go to the moon. Like people were like dreaming everything. They were so motivated, inspired. Like, oh man, that means by the time 2000 hits, man, we're gonna be out there. We're gonna be on Mars. We're gonna be on Jupiter, right? And so in 2001: Space Odyssey, like I'm not sure if people know this, but there are series. There's a whole like two other books. Like in 2010, like the next book is set in 2010, and people were like are regularly transiting to Mars and all these other planets. And then the next one was 2070 or 2020 or 2070 or some other thing. Um, I might be getting confused because it's been a while since I read it, but like Jupiter, like some AIs turned Jupiter into or was it aliens? AIs or aliens turned Jupiter into a sun. They called it Lucifer, into a second sun, and that really catapulted humanity to the next level, and they started finding like life on Europa. So it was all this other stuff, but the point is that people were really motivated, people were really inspired by all these changes happening, right? Um, so people thought like by our time we would have all these futuristic settings. Like the Jetsons is set in our time. It's not set in freaking 2020 or not set in 2200s, right? It's set in 2020 or 2018 or something like that, right? Um, because people were seeing all these changes and they thought it was going to happen faster than it did. And it wasn't because those were unrealistic. Yes, some of it was. Some of it is way more complicated than we thought it would be. But at the same time, most of it is not because uh, was not simply because that it was hard to do. A lot of that stuff before was hard to do, but we did it. It was more of a matter of I think they're going to go over this of a matter of interest, of investment, of people having faith and having and realizing that we could still do these difficult things. Anyways, okay. So the future envisioned from the perspective of the 1960s was hard to get to, but not impossible. And people were willing to entertain the idea. We now laugh at the Nucleon and Pan Am to the moon while applauding underpowered hybrid cars and EasyJet. And that's sad. Yes, it is. It is. Oh my gosh. I find it so ridiculous that when I go and out, like I don't want to drive a freaking gas car. Like, why am I in 2020 still having to consider driving a gas car? Like, we have all these other technologies. We know we can make cars with hydrogen cells. We know we can make electric cars, and still like super expensive or still super. And the designs of the cars. Oh my gosh, just don't even get me started. This is why I wanted to invent hover cars, because I thought it was ridiculous that over 100 years and we barely seen that much of a change between uh, the cars that we were driving. Okay, so the future that people in the 1960s hope to see is still the future we're waiting for today, half a century later. Instead of Captain Kirk and the USS Enterprise, we got the Priceline Negotiator and a cheap flight to Cabo. Cable. Yeah, it's freaking, so sad. It's so tragic. So these are major exceptions. As we've seen, computers and communication technologies advance enormously. Even in Windows 2000 is a far cry from HAL 9000. Yeah, like Windows 2000 is pretty crap, but is way more advanced than they thought. Like computers would be able to things that people thought computers would do. Um, and the internet has evolved into something far more powerful and pervasive than its architects had ever hoped for. But a lot of what seemed futuristic then remains futuristic now, in part because these technologies never received the sustained funding lavished on the electronic industries. Commercializing the technologies that have language seems a good place as any to start looking for ideas. Yep. Ooh. So, dang, it's been a long time on that, and that was only the first part out of one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. So I might stop it here and just do another video tomorrow because I don't mind doing long stuff, but I know a lot of people aren't going to really watch it. People probably not going to watch this, and my throat is dry. So I might come back later today and do another episode. But I still need to work on my portfolio and all the other good stuff. But this definitely has helped my energy levels. I feel a lot more motivated already, just with the introduction. And it's been really, that's what I said, it's sometimes you just got to make a video and just talk, just, whatever your passions are, just go with that. And that energizes you and stuff like that. So, yeah, this was really cool. I hope you learned something. Yeah, just let me know what you think if you're seeing this, when you're seeing this, and we'll do some other episodes later in the day or the week. I'm excited for this manifesto. This is pretty cool. Yeah. Thanks for watching and see you later. Bye.